Warning! This video contains language and subject material that may be absolutely, definitely, probably inappropriate for children. Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones, and welcome to the very last entry in an annual series that I called Saintstember, where I look at the mainline Saints Row games in Septembers. Ignoring that the last two videos went up in May and October, but I had good reasons for those. And in a weird Ouroboros of our favorite purple-clad gang members, we started with a game called Saints Row, and we're ending it with a game called Saints Row. And look, I know this game was basically the internet's punching bag for a while, but if all you want is a video that's just gonna dunk on how bad this game was, trust me, there are other places where you can get that. I'm here to do what I always do, and just give you some of my thoughts and opinions, which start with me saying, this is a perfectly average 6 or 7 out of 10, which is by no means horrendous. In fact, I'm going to spend the next this many minutes talking purely about the positives of this game. It did do quite a few things right, and I want to focus on those. Starting with the fact that, yes, the controller light does still turn purple while you play it. But for real, I love that for the first time since Saints Row 2, we actually have a story that involves the Saints taking down 3 rival gangs. Now, hold up, I can already feel some of you wanting to pause this video and head down to the comments to tell me that Saints Row the 3rd did too, but no, it didn't. I said rival gangs, as in gangs that want to take out each other as much as they want to take out the Saints. And while Saints Row 3 had 3 gangs, the Morningstar, Deckers, and Luchadors all belonged to the Collective Syndicate. I actually like that in this game, the gangs hate each other on top of hating you. So there are situations where you may be dealing with one gang only to have another one crash the party. Your character, now Boss instead of Playa, has the best level of customization the series has ever had. I'd argue it's even better than Saints Row 2. Mostly because it just brought back stuff that Saints Row 2 already did really well, like the gender sliders and the ability to layer a lot of different clothing items instead of just limiting it to upper body. Beyond that, it was mostly just quality of life improvements, like now you can change your appearance almost anywhere instead of having to go to a physical wardrobe location or spend money at the plastic surgeons. Now, since this is a new character, I elected not to keep my usual face full of piercings, tiny glasses, Cockney accent Playa, and instead, my boss is a large-breasted red-headed furry voiced by Erica Lindbeck.
Sorry about not being able to connect the other day. A whole lot of people tried to kill me, so I had to, murder the shit out of them, and, well, time got away from me.
There are some pretty great customization options in this game. You want your boss to be a swarm of live bees with a super pitched-down cowboy voice? Because guess what? You can do that. And I did do that.
That's right. Be your own boss.
One of these days, I'm gonna get you to listen to music in the car.
That's just beautiful right there. Heck, they were so proud of their character customization options, they flat out made an entirely separate game called Saints Row Boss Factory that's just making and designing different bosses, and you can even import them into the main game, so that's kinda cool. Also, I really love the city in this game. There's a unique charm to Santo Ileso that makes it feel really unique. You've got open desert areas, historic sites to explore, a glitzy and glamorous casino district, and so much more. I don't think the city is quite as good as Stillwater, but this is way better than Steelport, even if nobody seems to agree on how you're supposed to pronounce it.
Santo Ileso.
Santo Ileso.
Santo Ileso.
Santo Ileso.
Santo Ileso.
Santo Ileso, Santo Ileso.
I also love how many little references or Easter eggs to things there are, like spying the occasional Agents of Mayhem cameo, or that there's a massive comb out in the desert. And apparently there's even a reference to Xenogears or Xenoblade Chronicles that's just there, like this is a real thing. No, I'm still not gonna play Xenoblade. I'm never gonna play Xenoblade, stop asking. The main characters, while a bit cringy at times, are all pretty likable. I love that Kev cooks, I like that Eli is definitely a fish out of water when it comes to gang violence, and I like that Nina has what feels like a genuine friendship with the boss as they watch out for each other. Yeah, they're not as beloved or iconic as some of the main characters most fans know and love, like Johnny Gad or Kinsey Kensington, but I'd argue they're all better than a few tertiary saints we've had over the years, like Asha or Zemos. And I don't care what anybody says, all of these characters are better than whatever Shandi became from Saints Row 3 onward. Also, come on, they come with a cat named Snickerdoodle, so that's just great. I also really like that except for Eli, every character is a former member of one of the main gangs. Nina used to be a driver for the Panteros, who wear yellow, Kev used to DJ for the Idols, who are clad in pink, and even Boss starts the game out as a member of Marshall Defense Industries and is rockin' that blue. Until they eventually get fired. Everyone has their own reason for leaving their gangs, and it usually boils down to having each other's back so they can form the Saints. Overall, I really can't say I dislike these characters, especially based on a few out-of-context, "oh man, that's so cringe" clips people shared around Twitter when the game came out. And speaking of characters, you know how one of my biggest complaints since Saints Row 3 has been that the side activities no longer introduce fun or memorable characters who provide unique or wacky context as to why you're doing these things? Well, this game does. Activities are split into two main categories, side hustles and criminal ventures, and nearly all of them feature a distinct character who runs you through it. In the case of the ventures, you even interact with them while you're making progress and get a little wrap-up segment with them. I was honestly really happy to see this sort of thing again. I like this. Some of the side hustles are pretty fun. I personally loved Acha, which basically involves review bombing establishments that are under gang protection and then wiping out the hordes of enemies that come at you. Mechanically, it's nothing too fancy, you're just killing a bunch of people, but there is an absurdity to the narrative of it that's very Saints Row, and I enjoyed it. I also really liked the riding shotgun side hustle, where you use violence and murder to protect a driver. It reminded me a lot of the old drug trafficking missions, which were some of my favorites from the earlier games. On the other side, you have criminal ventures, which are established businesses that you get to plop down in the city at designated spots, and they all have their own quest lines, many of which bring back a lot of the iconic activities like mayhem or insurance fraud, which definitely feel nice and familiar. But there's also stuff like safely transporting radioactive waste, stealing trucks full of designer merch for Planet Saints, and unsafely transporting radioactive waste. Another thing I love in this game is their weapon system. Normally, I just grab whichever weapon I think looks best and use that, but Saints Row gives every weapon in the game a unique side quest, and completing that objective adds secondary abilities to your weapon. For example, if you kill enough enemies with the axe by hitting them from behind, the axe now heals you a little bit every time you hit someone with it. This was a really fun system, and it encouraged me to swap out my weapons way more than I normally do in other Saints Row games, because I actually enjoyed unlocking the different secondary effect and seeing which ones I liked best. You can also still physically customize your weapons, so while a certain iconic phallus weapon is gone, I can still take this bone club and apply a meat texture to it, which... come on, meat bone, that's close enough, right? Alright, so there we go. That is some genuine praise I have for Saints Row 2022. Now here come the buts. Let's take a look at that story. The game opens up with a roaring party being held at the Saints Church, on 3rd Street, of course, and Boss getting ambushed and buried alive. I feel like this was supposed to be a callback to the ending of the other game called Saints Row, where Playa is presumed dead after the boat they're on explodes, but... see, that scene took place at the end of the game, where we'd already formed an attachment to our mostly mute psychopath, and it also did a nice job raising the question of which character, be they from the Saints or a surviving member of a gang we've taken down, did the deed. Since this is basically the first scene of the game, we don't have any of that context for who these characters are or question why they may have betrayed us or tried to take some sort of revenge. That plot I mentioned about the 3 rival gangs? Yeah, it's not really about them. A large chunk of the plot is actually built around the Saints recruiting this really boring mustache guy named the Nawali, and showing him their power of friendship so hard that he's the guy who buried us alive in that opening scene so he can take over the Saints for himself. But not for power or control, but so that Boss's friends will become his friends in these really weird scripted social link events he's concocted. As far as the gangs go, Marshall is a pretty interesting take on the formula, since they aren't really a gang, but a private military corporation. Which kinda makes it dumber that part of their story is them taking over the Saints because Boss violated the non-compete agreement they signed when they were an employee. There is sort of a satisfying decision toward the end of the arc where you can choose to simply kill the man who fired you, Atticus Marshall, or strip him of all power and respect by removing him from the company that his family built. And then there's the idols, and they're just stupid. In so many uses of the word, they are stupid. Basically, just imagine the most obnoxious people you've ever seen on Reddit and turn them into murderous ravers. Their leader is just a few faceless goons called The Collective, and honestly, I didn't even realize I had taken down the leaders of the entire gang until Kev called to inform me of that, because it was just done with so little fanfare, I didn't even realize the people I just killed were the ones in charge. Los Panteros is probably the best gang, but that's mostly because they just feel like a very safe combination of gangs from the good games. They basically feel like a blend between the Carnales from Saints Row and the Brotherhood from Saints Row 2. But, oh my god, okay, I have to talk about this. The game does a pretty good job of setting up the Panteros boss, Sergio, as both a threat and someone that both Boss and Nina have a deeply personal reason to want to take down and get some genuine catharsis out of. This is the man who blew up the car that belonged to Nina's mom before she died of cancer. And how do we defeat him? Well, that's just it. We don't. The Nawali, that boring guy I mentioned earlier, just kills him in the middle of one of the missions.
I just kind of figured I'd be the one to... You know what? It's good. It's all good.
No, it is not all good, Futaba. It's incredibly boring, anticlimactic, and infuriating. I can't stress enough how little I am invested in the Nawali as a character, and he gets to kill one of the gang heads? Even if Boss didn't get to do it, that kill should have at least gone to Nina. So yeah, just to quickly recap, you take down the three gangs by choosing to kill or fire one leader, where firing is the more satisfying outcome, admittedly, killing a bunch of essentially meaningless dorks on a boat with virtually no fanfare, and then having the Nawali kill the third one. As much as I appreciated the return to the three-gang formula, these really aren't the most compelling stories or finales to tell with any of them, and I think they all had way more potential than what this game did with them. And as for that super great character customization I mentioned, yeah, it's awesome, except for a few things. Remember how I said I wanted my boss to be a busty red-headed furry? Well, imagine my surprise booting up the game for the first time and scouring the entire map trying to find Let's Pretend so I could buy a mascot costume, only to not be able to find it. Cause the costume shop is one of the criminal ventures and you can't unlock it until well over halfway into the game. The only reason I'm an armadillo is because that was a DLC costume and I bought all the DLC to make this video. And that awesome Swarm of Bees outfit I mentioned, you buy that from a store called Everything is $1 Million, which, okay, that's funny. But the shop doesn't unlock until after you beat the main story, and you can't rewatch cutscenes in this game. So the only way to ever get to see that outfit in earlier cutscenes is to take your post-game boss, save them in that outfit, start a new file, load that saved outfit onto your new boss, and then play through the game again, and then hope the cutscene you're watching actually remembers that you're bees so that your roommates aren't talking to your ghost.
We just gotta be a little more creative.
Last time we got creative, I got stabbed 3 times.
Hey, it would have been 4 times if Nina and I hadn't shown up.
It would have been 0 times if you were on time.
This is true.
And unfortunately, no matter how you choose to dress up your boss, this game loves to change your outfit to meet however they want you to look on a particular mission, which I do think takes away a lot of the charm of this being your character. I didn't make my own LARP outfit out of stuff I found in the garbage and the wooden hand from Happy Gilmore just to have the game force me back into their pre-established cardboard armor. And those activities I mentioned with actual characters, they are there, but they're no longer cutscenes. They're all done in-game, which means all of the interactions are just the character talks at you while they and boss blankly stare at each other. Also, if you're talking to people while stuff is happening, you can get into situations like this.
Anyone can leave a shitty review.
It's not the review I'm paying you for. It's what comes after.
Oh?
The targets on my list have some heavy hitters in their corner. You leave anything lower than 5 stars, they'll come out swinging.
And nearly all of the activities in this game are either just driving somewhere or killing a bunch of people. Sometimes both. Oh yeah, and sometimes taking pictures, because F it, gotta have a camera mechanic, right? Some of these are really frustrating because I feel like there was a genuine opportunity for a break in the gameplay. Like, one of them is a laundromat front that's a crime scene cleanup crew. I thought this could be a fun power wash simulator sort of minigame where we have to clean up blood or hide evidence, but no. See, the team takes care of that. My job is just to drive and ditch the car. Or you have the let's pretend armed robberies. Do we actually get to infiltrate a place and steal stuff? No, of course not. You're just the getaway driver. And, oh man, okay, so the cars in this game do not control well. They're all way too schleppery. Not slippery, schleppery. With an H and like 4 P's. I know it's been a running joke of mine to highlight how much I love
Motorcycles.
Motorcycles!
Motorcycles!
Motorcycles! Motorcycles!
Motorcycles!
Motorcycles!
But in this game, I really do, because they are the only vehicles that control halfway decently. Of course, the best way to travel is just launching yourself into the air with the gun that shoots barbells and then wingsuiting to your destination. I'm defying gravity. Oh yeah, also, I gotta say this, insurance fraud sucks in this game. Like, it's really hard to explain how they goofed it up, but it feels a lot less ragdoll-y and chaotic and fun than in the other titles. It just feels really stiff, and the best strategy is more about just trying to land on cars. And as for the weapons, actually I don't really have a butt on this one, that's mostly just genuine praise. I guess the closest I have to a complaint is that you can turn one of the weapons into a simple and clean Saints Row Keyblade. No, I still don't like Kingdom Hearts. Stop asking. Now, some of you may have noticed that I haven't really commented much on the whole LARPing side quest, because honestly, I think it's just fine. There is a nice level of goofiness and sincerity to it in that get ye flask kind of way. I honestly think having a wide-scale LARP sandbox game with this type of characters and dialogue would have been better as a completely separate title, and given itself more of a stick of truth sort of vibe. It's perfectly fine, you do get some neat weapons and clothing items out of it, and I'll admit, I was laughing my butt off at the finale because it's just ridiculous in a really good way. One of my favorite bits in this whole side quest is they have custom insta-kills where you still pretend murder people, and yeah, it's just kind of fun. The main plot ends with Boss taking down the Nawali, and their friends joining them on the roof to watch the sunset. Eli says that all things considered, this wasn't a bad start for the Saints, implying that there may have been some future adventures planned for our crew, but alas, we know those would never come to fruition since Volition got shut down in August of 2023. And barring some sort of miracle, I don't think we'll ever see another Saints Row game ever again. And even if we do, it probably won't be for a good long while, and certainly won't follow up on what this game set in motion. Oh yeah, and there's an extra ending for Criminal Venture completion where you build a Saints Tower and get to watch a montage of the main cast singing Love Shack by the B-52s. That was kind of fun. Despite being a target of constant ridicule from the very first teaser for the game, I just can't bring myself to hate Saints Row 2022 like a lot of other people do. I can't even really agree with the people who try to say that this game isn't Saints Row. Yes, I think it dropped the ball in a lot of ways, particularly in the narrative by shifting all potentially interesting gang focus to the Nawali, a character with all the charm of a tomato and mayo sandwich, but I also think it managed to do a lot of things that I did like, and I think it's important to talk about those. I'm actually a little sad that we're never gonna see a Saints Row 2022 2. Because taking a perfectly average, albeit rocky in a few places game before giving us one of the greatest sandbox games of all time was basically what Volition did back with the original series, and I'm curious if they could have done that again. Before I wrap things up, I guess I should quickly talk about the DLC. Aside from a bunch of cosmetic packs, there are a few that are worth talking about. The first is The Heist and the Hazardous, which is a short but pretty fun and memorable extra mission where the Saints set out to ruin the life of a cocky Hollywood actor who tried to screw them over. Then there's Doc Ketchum's Murder Circus, which has no story, and it's a mode I never really bothered with. Just imagine Professor Genki stuff from Saints Row 3, but instead of a wacky Japanese game show, it's a bad Rob Zombie film. There's also a wingsuit minigame for an energy drink called Kaijuice, which I think is pretty funny since the series already gave us a kaiju-sized can of energy drink named Paul, and yeah, it's alright. And then there's A Song of Ice and Dust, which is just more LARPing stuff, but they honestly put a lot of effort into this one, and it really just hammers home even more for me that I think this particular world and concept would have worked better as a new IP rather than as side content in a Saints Row game. And I guess that's really all I've got to say. Not just about this game, but Saints Row as a whole, as this is very likely to be the final Saintstember video I'll ever make. It's crazy that across the past 5 years I've looked at 4 mainline Saints Row titles, 1 smaller spin-off, a completely separate series with arguable in-universe tie-ins, and now a reboot. I've worked with friends to talk about these games and had a great time with them, and even though this series is such a departure from the sort of stuff I usually talk about on this channel, I'm really glad I stuck with it. Saintstember has definitely been a personal passion project of mine, and it's bittersweet to see it all end this way. I hope those of you that have stuck around enjoyed it for what it was. Back in my very first entry of this series, I asked you all to leave a thanks Greg in the comments, because my friend Greg is the one who got me into this series, and he's the one who helped me finish that first episode after my 360 suffered the Red Ring of Death. So I can think of no better way to end the final Saintstember than by just saying it once again. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help.
Oh dang, hi Greg!